our brother Belitsos. Welcome, Divine Brother Belitsos. Award-winning publisher and author, as well as an editor and educator. His chief area of expertise is the Urantia book. With the adventure of being human, healing a broken word, and appearing on Gaiam TV and Coast to Coast Radio with George Newry. Belitsos saw the principal author of the acclaimed One World Democracy, which is based in part on the political teachings of the Urantia Revelation. He also edited and published Discovery Atlantis, and the Urantia book about the location of the Garden of Eden, so many other things and aspects. And we're just so grateful and honored to welcome you here today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Morning, everybody. Good to see you. You all look so beautiful. There was a phrase in that prayer, the Aramaic prayer was ooh la la. Did you catch that? It was ooh la la. Oh, I thought you said, okay, got it. So ooh la la, everybody. We're going to talk about the Urantia book. And there has never, ever been an introduction like that for this topic, because it's been a suppressed topic, as many of you know. There's been sort of the metaphysical community, and the Urantia community has been separate. It has, I don't know exactly why, but I have my theories about suppression. So this is historic. It's a convergence of this teaching into this community. So it's something to celebrate, at least for me, because I've gone almost 40 years studying this thing and have never had an appearance like this. Typically, the Urantia people just talk to the Urantia people. Any of you ever been to one of their conferences? How many of you have a Urantia book? How many of you have read it? A little bit. Ooh la la. How many of you would like to read it? Some of you, yeah. Well, who has the time? I'm a publisher, and I barely get people to read a 200-page book that I. Actually, I'm working on it. This is kind of for that purpose. I'm going around the country now giving introduction, but it's information rich, because this is suppressed information, as I said, and we need to get these basic ideas out to the public, particularly to our family, to our community. So that's why I'm here. And I want to thank Rob Potter. The way I met Rob was I wanted to put on a conference with Cobra and David Wilcock and people talking about these issues that Rob specializes in, as to the cabal and our solution to that. And so out of the blue, I called Rob Potter and I invited him to speak. It didn't work out on the conference, but it was amazing to discover that Rob loves the Urantia book. And again, it's such a rare thing in folks kind of on the other side of that divide that I mentioned. The contemporary metaphysics doesn't yet know this. So we're going to plunge into this, but the approach that I'd like to take today, because of Rob and his work, and because also Michael's talk yesterday, which really harmonizes with what I have to say. So I've kind of tweaked this to talk about the Lucifer rebellion and its aftermath. So we got sort of bad news, but then we're going to get to the good news. So the Lucifer rebellion is a slightly scary subject, but we are anchored, aren't we, for this? We just had a good prayer time. Ooh la la. So these are key questions I'd like to look at, or we can look at together. So this is supposedly a civilized world, yet we're always tipping toward genocidal violence. It's happening again, isn't it, in Iraq? So what accounts for this and for the unsustainable nature of our civilization? What underlies the drift toward collapse? economic collapse in particular. And is this normal for a planet at our stage in evolution? So what I'm putting up there, I'm going to read to you, so you don't have to read and then listen to something else. So everything that's up there will be read to you so you can focus with me. So the question is the Urantia book able to provide its version of history? Is that going to help us deal with what's happening right now? And right now we are dealing with it, but having this backstory I think is essential and will motivate us and inspire us. So the premise for the first half of this is that, according to the Urantia book and many sources, there was an off-planet misanthropic force, misanthropic meaning anti-human force, that has been present since way, way prehistoric times, that is a primary source of our contemporary crisis. The source of this difficulty is an angelic rebellion, and as Michael mentioned yesterday, this was in far distant times. The being who carried this off, according to the Urantia book and many sources, is Lucifer. He was the angelic chief for the local group of inhabited planets, over 600 planets. Along with his first assistant, this is angelic beings in the angelic hierarchy, someone named Satan, they rebelled against the galactic celestial government. And this is 200,000 years ago. And the result on Earth and in other planets, there were 37 total planets that went with Lucifer's program. So we're one of 37 rebellion planets. And the result of this is what we call a double default. A double default is, we're going to explain this over the next half hour, means that our planetary chief executive, which is another angelic being named Caligastia. How many of you have heard of Caligastia, the name Caligastia? So this is new to you, and we'll be introducing this. This is the person who's like the governor general of the planet. So there are other names for this being that many of you know, but the Urantia book calls him Caligastia. Caligastia. He led our planet over to the rebellion. So here's some hypotheses, those of you who want to look into this and research this more deeply. Number one, fallen angels and their human collaborators covertly have held power on the planet. Sounds plausible, doesn't it? The so-called ancient astronauts, the Nephilim, did indeed interbreed with us, as we learn in the Bible and from Sitchin's work and other people's work. Third, Satanists are energized by ritual invocation of demonic spirits, have been over eons. However, this is news, good news, very good news. This rebellion, we are told, not in the Urantia book, but post-Urantia book, was adjudicated. The rebellion was adjudicated in heavenly courts in the mid-'80s. Adjudication means a judgment was handed down by a court.
Good or bad? Good judgment, bad judgment?
It was a good judgment because the judgment basically was stating that Lucifer and his minions defaulted in their charge, which was to oversee these local planets in a benign and loving way. And he went astray, Lucifer, took 37, he went to all the heads of all these planets in his domain and preached to them a new teaching that was a teaching sort of like what you might think of as communism, which is that we in a central location are going to accelerate evolution as fast as we can, and we're going to dictate it to you. So he became kind of a cosmic dictator. We'll get more to that. And the last of these is that these satanic practices continue, as we've been documenting here. But according to what we're told, we being the community I'm with, which is a subset of the Urantia community, it's the esoteric part of the Urantia community. The Urantia community has like an exoteric, people that just believe in a book, and then there's an esoteric practicing community that's receiving channeled teachings all the time. Hundreds and hundreds of sessions all the time. And so we're getting updates, and I'm going to be giving you those updates. So again, this idea of adjudication of the rebellion that we state because we've been told hundreds of times that in the period of 1985 to 7 in heavenly courts, they resolved a case called Lucifer versus Gabriel. Gabriel being chief angel for the local universe. So in the Urantia book Cosmology, the local universe is 10 million inhabited planets. And, I submit this for your research consideration, not as a doctrine, not as, a lot of this is metaphor. A lot of this is translated language that may not fit your language. So try it on and reject what you can't, doesn't feel right. After this adjudication, after this great event, this is a great event, not only on our planet, but throughout the local system of inhabited planets. After that point, high celestials launched what they call the correcting time, and later something called the celestial teaching mission on our planet. This is supplementary to the Urantia book. So the correcting time is a celestial program that we're all really part of, and that we're here because of it. And it's with all of the communities, including the traditional religions and the angelic host of the planet, now having come back to the light, because part of the angelic host of the planet was on the dark side, you see. So they've come back over, and so they're seeding ideas and they're seeding spiritual impulses to everyone in every community, every religion. And it's non-doctrinaire. It's inspiration from above that's coming to each of us. So we each have our own language for this, and this is one of the languages for it. And third, the adjudication of the Lucifer rebellion meant that the celestial quarantine of our planet was now lifted. So there was, after this great rebellion, there's a long story about this, but there was a necessity. Once the rebellion ran its course throughout all these planets, then the higher administration of the local universe, had to quarantine these planets and let them evolve on their own. And actually, there's a loving purpose for that we're going to get to. But we have been under technical quarantine, meaning getting messages to us was much more difficult. It's certainly feasible. And the way they explain it is through the archangelic circuit was the way to get messages in, and they could get messages in. But now, all the circuitry, you think of it as like almost electronic broadcast circuits, all those circuits have been reconnected as of the late 1980s. One of the first things that happened when they reconnected the circuits and removed us from the quarantine was the fall of communism. So that happened right immediately after that. And spirit was flowing into the people of Earth. And so in Eastern Europe and in Russia, people began to rise up. And this is the first of these big popular people's rebellions that we began to see all through this period. We saw it in the Philippines. We've seen it, all these different places in the late 80s, beginning to wake up politically, but that means waking up spiritually. So that was the first manifestation of what we call the correcting time. So the correcting time is generic and planet-wide, and the teaching mission, or celestial teaching mission, is a mission to Urantia people using their language. So the Urantia folks then began receiving messages at this time, and we have over 5,000 transcribed sessions. So main features of this talk, I'm going to summarize the history of the Lucifer rebellion. I'm going to explain this thing called the double default. I'm going to talk about the current status of the rebellion and into the future. And I'm going to introduce something called the co-creative era. There's a lot of different names for this. And it's post-apocalyptical. So a little bit background on the Urantia book for those that are new to it. Some key facts. The Urantia book was received in the 20s and 30s to a group in Chicago and first published in 1955. There's innumerable printings. There's 196 papers or chapters, so it's big. It's 2,097 pages. There's 17 translations, and in the kind of the mainstream Urantia movement, the big issue, the big effort is to translate this thing into all the major world's languages. So they're really getting far into this, and now they're completing Arabic and Chinese, and Korean is out, Russian is out, German, Italian, all kinds of European languages, Spanish. Very big in Latin America, the Urantia book. So here are some main tenets of the text. On the universe in the cosmology, it says that the cosmos teems with billions of inhabited worlds, actually trillions. 7 trillion inhabited planets. And by the way, in regard to Star Trek and Gene Roddenberry, he also was influenced by the Urantia book. We know this because I know a person who knows a friend of his who said, oh yeah, he knew about the Urantia book, and that did influence Roddenberry in creating Star Trek. Star Trek is a kind of a map of aspects of the Urantia book. In the spiritual teaching, number 2 there, the spirituality of the Urantia book is unique because it's an evolutionary system. It's an evolutionary spirituality. It speaks of the evolution of our soul. It's appropriate for us because we're evolving, we're ascending, we're going through ascension portals. The soul evolves. So in this cosmology, the soul is an evolutionary entity, but the spirit part of us is unchanging. It's God within us, unchanging. But the soul is a creation of our mind and our spirit working together. Our decisions then create soul. Every time you make a decision that has import in your life, the universe hits the save button, and it saves that energetically. It saves that action. Also, the philosophy of the Urantia book can be summarized as a life devoted to unity. And unity, it's like if you shined light through a crystal, it would break into 3 parts philosophically: truth, beauty, and goodness. So truth, beauty, and goodness is the core teaching. So if you're trying to be good, you got a third of it. You also need beauty in what you're doing. Beauty and truth together go much better. And truth is a different aspect of the light. So the 3 together, and we're going for that. Theologically, the Urantia book is quite advanced, and if you have an interest in theology, it is really fun to read this thing, especially the opening 10 papers. It speaks of a God of love. It's a Trinitarian deity, sort of like Christianity. This God is absolute, but God has a part that evolves. So it's a paradox. God is absolute and unchanging, but deity also evolves with us. Deity evolves as all planets evolve. All these inhabited planets, all these trillions and trillions of beings are evolving their souls. As they evolve their souls, the divine evolves, because the divine is experiencing itself and the universe through us as we experience. So there's an evolutionary aspect. A few more main tenets. The Urantia book is a teaching that's focused a lot on the afterlife, and it has a teaching about reincarnation that's technically different than most teachings. We don't really have that in our scope today. The higher worlds in the Urantia book, you may have read about Steiner's teachings on higher worlds, and this is a very interesting, elaborate teaching about higher worlds. The history in the Urantia book is a whole section, part 3. It fills in these huge gaps, and we're going to mainly deal with that today. And then on the subject of Jesus, how many of you know that part 4 of the Urantia book is the angelic life of Jesus? So the angelic record of the life of Jesus is in the text, and that's 700 pages, so it's plenty. And if you do want to read this, I suggest you read part 4. Just pick it up and read that. It's like reading a novel, and it's incredible language and totally inspiring. These are the opening words of the Urantia book. It goes like this. Because of conceptual poverty associated with so much ideational confusion, pretty good for an opening phrase, I have been directed to formulate this introductory statement by the Orvanton Corps of Truth Revealers. And if you can see, I don't know if you can see it on this screen, but this is the scale of cosmology. And the Urantia book was thought to have come from the center of the Milky Way galaxy, but people now who are astrophysicists who are reading the text have interpreted it to mean that it actually comes from the center of the local galaxy cluster. And it's a little ambiguous about who Orvonton is. So Orvonton is their term for the local superuniverse, which is 1 trillion inhabited planets. And that's 1/7 of the inhabited universe. So Orvonton is the name of this huge territory. So the authors of the Urantia book were authorized from this place, from the center of Orvonton. And here's a contemporary map. The universe is evolutionary. And just a quick note, when the Urantia book came through in the 30s, 40s, we didn't really know much about an evolving universe, and we certainly didn't have evolutionary spirituality. It was just beginning to come in with Aurobindo, Teilhard de Chardin. It was a very new idea that we have an evolving planet, evolving spirituality, that the cosmos is evolving. We had Darwin, we knew about biological evolution. So the Urantia book was very early text on evolution and evolution of the cosmos. This is really a key phrase describing what the search for all of us on this and other planets is. The sublime search for the God of universes is the supreme adventure of the inhabitants of all inhabited worlds. Here's one of my favorite phrases from the Urantia book. Belief is always limiting and binding. Faith is expanding and releasing. Belief fixates. Faith liberates. And the problem with belief I've found over the years is you don't know that you have a belief. You think this is just the way it is, right? And you go around saying, well, it's like this, and this is why I see it, but other people have beliefs, but you don't have beliefs. You kind of know what you have it down. And so I have found with Urantia people, they have become doctrinaire, many of them. They think that this is where it's at. That's why they don't dialogue very well, and that's why I broke out of that community to be in dialogue. And thank you. So I don't take anything in the Urantia text or anything else as a rigid belief system. I just present this as language that inspires. There are some facts here, though, that are historic, and on those, I stand on those as factual. And I have seen facts, historic facts in the Urantia book borne out by research, and we're going to talk about that. These are the parts of the text. Number one is my favorite. It's part one is on the central and super universe, so I've been telling you a little bit about that. Super universe, remember that's called Orvonton. That's our super universe. Our local universe, anybody know the name? Lewis? Nebadon. Nebadon is the name of the local universe of 10 million inhabited planets. Actually, it's not quite 10, it's actually 6 million, I think. But it's potential of 10 million inhabited planets. They're always seeding new planets and bringing life to these planets by the thousands all the time. They evolve life. So this first part is on the central and super universe. Local universe, as we just mentioned, that's Nebadon is the name. This is all dimensions, up to seventh dimension. So the central universe, which we're going to see about more, is seventh dimensional. So the seventh heaven, so to speak. And the last part, as I mentioned, is about the life and teachings of Jesus. So here it is, the name of our planet, Urantia. How does that sound? How does that feel? Is that a pretty good name? This is what they're saying is the name of the planet according to the upstairs. So this name was trademarked. I never liked the idea of trademarking the name of a planet. So the mainstream Urantia people think that's a good idea. But that's the name according to the celestials we work with. Now there's some things in the Urantia book that are spiritually incorrect, at least where I come from, which is Marin County. First of all, it's not really cool to talk about God as Father so much, at least in Marin County, but here apparently it is. That's wonderful. So we think of God as Father and Mother, don't we? And Christianity and Islam, et cetera, they think of God as father, there's no mother. So everybody switched to mother. And so we want to bring in both, it's both and. So secondly, that the divine is personal. So, may the force be with you it doesn't, I don't know, that's not very warm and fuzzy. May the force be with you. If God is just an energy, it's just a force, not something you can embrace and love. Can you embrace and love a force? Can a force love you? Can an energy love you? Can an energy know who you are? And so if God is just energy, that's not very inspiring. So the Urantia book teaches God is all those things. It's personal, impersonal, it's evolutionary, it's absolute, infinite, many attributes, but there's a personal attribute. So if you're divine, your father, your mother, you're at least self-aware, right? You know that you are divine mother, divine father. So that means you're personal. You're a person. And if you don't know that you are divine father, mother, how can you be higher than human? They often, in the Urantia book, use the term first source and center. The only problem with that is it implies that the source doesn't know you. Like source is impersonal. It's like, source loves me. Oh, thanks, source. But if it's father, oh yeah, father. That's a heart from the heart. So we can debate this. Jesus as incarnate God. Now, in our circles, there's some problems with that because we are in kind of a rebellion against Christianity, and the Christianity stuffed it down. As Tricia was saying, she was given this dogma about incarnate Christ and the strictures on you and this morality. So we began to throw out the idea of Christ as incarnate God, and we began to say, well, he was just a great man. He was like Buddha. So the Urantia book brings that back in as deity incarnate and at a status different than Buddha. Buddha is not deity incarnate in the Urantia. I'm just saying, I'm just reporting what it says. So next is in the Urantia text, ascension trumps reincarnation. So this is a big area of debate, and I'll probably do some future workshops on this. It's beyond scope of today. Sorry, miss one. The Urantia book is philosophic spirituality. So we have spirituality that is self-help, and then we have spirituality that is philosophic. That means it includes self-help, but it's also philosophic. Philosophic meaning there's a bridge between science and religion. When you have science in your system, you need a way to coordinate science with spirituality. The intervening schema to do that is called philosophy. That's why we need philosophic spirituality. If you just have spirituality without science, you're not really modern. So if you want to really jive with modern folks, you need science in your system, real science. And so that's why the Urantia book is philosophically spiritual. A lot of science in the text. Finally, the politically incorrect aspect of the Urantia book, it's a lot of stuff that's not in right now. The idea of races differing genetically is a big part of the Urantia book. The idea that Satan and Lucifer were real is something that took me a long time to accept. But it is what we're going to be talking about today. Atlantis is a big subject for us, but the Urantia book tells us that Atlantis, doesn't say it explicitly, this is my interpretation, that Atlantis was actually Eden, and Eden sent out emissaries that created Atlantis and other civilizations. Finally, the Urantia book advocates democratic world federation. It advocates a United Nations that can actually stop war. So a United Nations that sits there while we blow ourselves up, not working too well. And this is just a quick item on Urantia politics. One of my specialties is a book that I put out with another friend. Quickly, it teaches global citizenship. It teaches that service is better than profit. It teaches the centrality of family life. The priority is something called social sustainability, and favors world federation. This is a book I just published. I have it back on the table. This is a text on sustainability, but not environmental, it's social sustainability. How to build institutions that are sustainable, not institutions that are blowing up like banks or seemingly ready to collapse. We need sustainable institutions, and this is a teaching that's new in the Urantia community. Some of you may know that Jerry Garcia was a student of the Urantia book. Jerry Garcia loved the Urantia book. He died with one by his bed. I verified that. I live in his hometown. I've talked to people there. And this is documented in his biography. Also, Jimi Hendrix, I found out recently, was a big fan of the Urantia book. Hendrix carried the Urantia book around with him with his Bob Dylan songbook. Those are the two things he carried. Santana is also a fan. This is recent posting at his Facebook site. And you can see the influence of the Urantia book in lyrics and the recent tour. Anybody seen the tour? Yes. It's really quite spiritual and beautiful. Yeah, it's amazing what he's doing, and that's Urantia inspired, but other inspirations. So, why do we have to have a revelation? What do we need it for? I mean, we have transmissions, we have channeling all the time, but this is something else. This is a 2,000-page textbook. Why do we have to have it? What we learn from the Urantia book, and also you can learn from intuition, is evolution is aided by spirit. Each of us get revelation. You might call it auto-revelation, or revelation coming to you. But the Urantia book tells us there were 5 great epochal revelations. And that revelation occurs at the time of greatest travail. This is the first great epochal revelation 500,000 years ago. I have this kind of awful picture here because it defaulted. 500,000 years ago, there was an advent of an avatar staff on the planet. This was 100 beings who came to teach. We're going to get into this a little bit more. 200,000 years ago, there was a rebellion. 37 planets joined it, as I mentioned. Earth's angels went astray. So this is kind of hard to accept, isn't it? That our angels went to the dark side. That's hard. That's emotionally hard. And not all of them, but the majority followed, remember Caligastia, they followed Caligastia. But there were 2 groups of angels on the planet. There were those of the light and those of the dark. The second, this is the location of that. We're going to come back to that because time is short. This is what we call the second epochal revelation. Now, the reason I have this map here, this is Cyprus, present-day Cyprus, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Turkey. Recent research, which I was part of, had discovered a sunken land off the eastern coast of Cyprus. This is known to oil exploration, that there's a sunken continent. So Urantia people got this data, and began to correlate it. The Urantia book says that the location of Adam and Eve is here, and this land sunk, but the entire island was inhabited 37,000 years ago, and this is the second great visitation to the planet. Each planet has an Adam and an Eve. So this is pretty strange, right? So we have Adam and Eve. Most of us think of that as a big myth, a pretty cool myth in a way. But actually, Adam and Eve is an order of being. They're a type of being. It's a generic name for types of beings who come to planets to change the biology of the humans. They actually interbreed, and they bring higher genetics to the planet. So this is where we get the hypothesis that Eden, this location, is the source land of the Atlanteans, who then seeded all through the world, and especially this area. So here in red I have the fact that the mission of Adam and Eve defaulted. This is a little bit more about them. They're known as descending superhumans. They carry a genetic blueprint for our final stages of evolution. We're talking about when you get to advanced utopian evolution, We are still mutating. We are improving biologically. They bring a genetics that's interbred through their children, and then we enhance our consciousness because we have a more efficient, more effective genetic genome. We can think of them as the parents of evolution. They produce a superior race, numbering 1 million. This is their progeny, and their progeny, again, were to be on the island of Cyprus. Then this was to intermarry throughout the world. We'll skip through some more of this. The third great revelation to our planet is quite obscure. This is the advent of Melchizedek. So we've heard the order of Melchizedek. And this is a lot of specifics about Melchizedek. There's an order of beings known as Melchizedeks. Melchizedeks throughout the universe are the teachers. So throughout all these inhabited planets, Melchizedek is a being that oversees education and many other things. However, Melchizedeks can do emergency incarnations. I don't know why. So Melchizedek is a historic personality who did a historic incarnation. He initiated Abraham. Remember in the Bible, those of you who know your Bible from your youth, Abraham, I think I was mentioned by Tricia or by Michael, was initiated by Melchizedek, who just walked into his tent and said, "Hi, I'm Melchizedek, I'm the high priest." He was a real historic personality. The fourth great revelation purports to be Jesus, incarnation. What he's described as a historic personality who is a divine incarnation. Many Christian beliefs are stated in the Urantia book to be correct. The Urantia book contains a lengthy biography, as we know. This is a book I just put out that has new transmissions from him and from his female consort. So another big revelation of the Urantia book is that there's Christ, but then there's a female Christ. There's a male and a female. So the male incarnates. Female doesn't need to incarnate. She's already present as all of matter and space. But she's personified. So she's the local universe personified. So she doesn't need to come here. She's here. She's inherently, intrinsically present. But the divine aspect has to incarnate to be personally present. So the fifth epochal revelation, the Urantia book, purported to be, this is a belief system. Don't have to accept it. It originated in Chicago. These are the people that brought it through. This is the main person that was, some people believe, was the actual channel of it. He was a well-known psychiatrist. He studied with Freud in Vienna. He was a mainstream sort of person. But he was brought into a situation in Chicago where there was a transmission that was occurring that people think, some people think it was Edgar Cayce. There's a whole book on this. They think it was Edgar Cayce. It was the same time Edgar Cayce. But it was a being like Edgar Cayce, a person, not a being. It was a person who transmitted the way Edgar Cayce did. He was totally asleep. They couldn't wake him up. And he was teaching the people that were there in the room things that were far beyond this man's mentality. Went on for a number of years until one day the being said, "We want to give you a big book. Are you ready?" And that began in 1923. This is William Sadler later years when the book was published, 1955. This is the guy that some people think was the channel. Now, we don't know who the channel was. They decided, Celestial said, "We don't want you to make this person into a famous person," and so they have, the identity is not known. This guy was the brother of the founder of Kellogg's. So those are the 5 revelations we've done, given all of you a handout which covers 7. So this is a reference for you. My contact info is on that page. The 6th event is what I mentioned, the correcting time. These are books I published on it. And the 7th event is something that is now coming into play, and Rob and I have spoken about this, and I think this is the part that interfaces with what Rob is talking about with Cobra and others, that there's what we call a magisterial mission. A magisterial mission is a being of the order of Christ who has a different job than Christ is all love and mercy, but then there's an aspect of the divine that incarnates for judgment, but not like Sunday school type judgment. It's a judgment that terminates the age. It's the age, an age of eons of time has to be terminated so that you can kind of leap to the next age. So this is the new era that we're all talking about, and we're now getting teachings on this, we being the Urantia people. This is what you have as a summary. So a quick run through Urantia cosmology. The Urantia book is amazing to those in physics and cosmology because it states that the universe has a center around which everything rotates, which is like Native American spirituality. It says the universe is a big wheel, right? The medicine wheel. It's a big, 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 big wheel. So we look out at all the galaxies out there. According to the Urantian text, all those galaxies are rotating counterclockwise around a center. However, you cannot see the center. The center is in seventh dimension. It's in a higher dimension. But in the Urantia book, in these higher worlds, in these higher dimensions, they're not like angels floating around in the clouds playing harps. They are planets that are material. However, their matter in these higher dimensions, they don't just have like 100 elements, right? The atomic chart, 100 elements. They have 200 elements. And in the higher dimensions, they have 300 elements. So we have 100 elements plus the radioactive elements. So, but it's really 100 elements. So there's 300 elements here. These are actual worlds, but they're far, far beyond space and time. It's the highest and deepest and most inner plane of reality. So here's one conception of this of an artist, and this is a little bit more scientific conception. So in the center of this is what I said was the seventh dimensional central universe, which is never beginning and never ending. So the central universe is not a created universe. It has always been there. It's fun to think of a universe that's always been there. And the beings that live there are eternal. They were never born. They're eternal beings. So deity, of course, is eternal. God is eternal. Source is eternal. But the beings who are very, very high beings live there are eternal beings. And these eternal beings will socialize with us when we ascend there. So we're going to have a really big party when we get there. And we're going to meet these eternal beings. But these eternal beings have one problem. They don't know what it's like to struggle, to have experiences with uncertainty like we do. So they are hungry to meet us, and we're hungry to meet them. And that's the great party of the universe, is the meeting of the eternals and the evolutionals. That's us. This is another depiction. So I mentioned, remember I mentioned Orvonton. So Orvonton being our super universe, but this artist actually got it wrong. This is 100,000 galaxies, not one galaxy. So these 7 great sectors are rotating counterclockwise around the central universe. Out here are galaxies that are uninhabited. So most of the galaxies in deep space are not inhabited. The only ones inhabited are here in this inner band. So think of these as these are 3D, they're three-dimensional galaxies. But in the Urantia cosmology, the higher dimensions are like adjacent to these places. And they're married into the third dimension. They are in service to us. Many of the beings are in service, not all, but many are in service to us, all the way up to the 7th dimension. They're servers. But they have many other projects beside the human project. But the human project is one of the great projects of the universe, which is to evolve humans from dust to perfection. Now that's a big project. And you do get to perfection when you evolve, ascend through the ascension portal, and get to this ultimate ascension portal Here, when you get here, you perfected. All of your negative traits, they're long gone. And so you're now of status that you can meet the eternals. This is a depiction, artist depiction of what's called the island of paradise. So at the center of the central universe is an island that is stationary. This stationary island is, as I said, seventh dimension. This is the geographic location of the divine. However, the divine is omnipresent. It's in all space. The divine is in every center. It's omnicentric. It's a wonderful word. God is in every point, right? Certainly, the Divine Mother is in every point in space. But also, everything when we do with theology, everything's both and. Deity is absolute and evolutionary. That's a paradox. Deity is omnipresent, but it has a center, and that's a big paradox. That's just an artist's depiction of the center. Again, we've talked about God as evolutionary, and they call that the supreme being. There's Darwin. So a little bit more on the organization of inhabited planets. The reason being, we're going to talk about why things went astray on Urantia. Super universes, 7 of them. Remember that? There's 7 big inhabited galaxy clusters. And you can see the rest. So each super universe has 7 billion local systems. So our local systems have 1,000 worlds. We already looked at that. So I don't know if you can read this. I'll read it for you. So a normal planet has 7 stages of evolution of the planet. According to this cosmology, life is implanted as single cells. Over eons of time, they evolve as humans. Stage 3, off-planet beings establish a capital city. Stage 4, this is in red because these things did not happen on Urantia. Okay? So stage 4, off-planet rulers purge abnormal genetic strains. This is way distant. Eugenics. Stage 5, genetic uplift by the Adam and Eve. We talked about them incarnating. Stage 6, the Adamic race interbreeds with the indigenous peoples. Stage 7, a complete mixing of races. So actually from stage 3 to 7, these defaulted on planet Earth. There was a capital city was established that we don't know anything about. And that's because of the Lucifer rebellion. We're going to get into that now. Well, this is just because this is complicated. This is another way to slice that. A nebula set in motion, solar systems form, life is implanted from the outside, primitive humans evolve. Planetary headquarters is a city founded by avatars. Then there's Adam and Eve, and then there's a high civilization. So the 2 in red went astray. So we have an atypical planetary timeline. Do you think that every planet has a cabal that's trying to wreck everything? So what kind of universe would that be? Would that be a sustainable universe? Does every planet have Hiroshima? Does every planet have ISIS in Iraq that's beheading children? This is anomalous. And because we're fish that are swimming in this, we don't know, we don't realize. So extraterrestrials are helping us to understand, but some of the ETs that have come here are from rebellion planets. That's a whole nother discussion. So these are the defaults, the dual defaults I spoke about. These are a list of anomalies. Genocidal war, pervasive violence, global poverty, satanic cultism, religious strife, elite rule through secrecy, organized crime, etc., etc. So the question was, when Adam and Eve came, were there indigenous folks here? So, yes, there was. So from a single cell implanted by higher beings, we evolved the animal life. Animal life evolved human hominids. and then hominids spread throughout the world. They mutated into 6 root races. You get that also in Blavatsky, I think. 6 root races, and these 6 root races are the indigenous races. So Asia, Chinese, Korean, the red race, the Native Americans, and all the races, the black race. These are indigenous races that are naturally evolving from the long evolution. So Adam and Eve come and find present the indigenous races. So over eons of time, their children intermarry with them. So there's millions of sort of indigenous peoples, tribes. They're tribes everywhere. And so they came down in Mesopotamia area because that was the best access to Africa, Asia, and Europe. That's why they came there. So the first visitation, now this is a hard one because we have no evidence of this. However, Sitchin, how many read Sitchin's? So Sitchin says what? That 450,000 years ago, the Anunnaki came from Nibiru, right? So it's kind of a same timeline, isn't it? The Anunnaki are not the same as this, but they correlate because remember Sitchin talks about a rebellion. Remember when the rebellion is? About 200,000 years ago. So it matches the Urantia timeline. So the purpose of this visitation is the arrival of an invisible planetary director general. His name is Caligastia. He comes with a staff that's visible. The staff are like hybrids. They're like ET hybrids. They're actually created using indigenous genetics and an indigenous body, but they're higher beings. So they're like higher beings that are incarnate, but they're more like, I would think of them as hybrid. Their location is here. Now this is not easy to figure this out. This is the Persian Gulf. So there is off the waves, the edge of Persian Gulf, that's Iran. There are artifacts to be found by archaeologists of this big ancient city that was there for 300,000 years until the Lucifer rebellion started. And after the rebellion, everything just went to chaos and pieces. And that city was wrecked by warfare and then later sunk beneath the waves. That's called Dalmatia, and the legacy of that group of beings is, in my opinion, the source of the Illuminati bloodlines, because those 100 humans were they were sexual, they were able to interbreed. So they bred a bloodline. Now it goes back 200,000 years ago. So this is a summary. So this is 100, you can call them ancient astronauts. They're given flesh and blood bodies, indigenous DNA. They're given life forms, and they're known as the 100 staff. They come with something called the Tree of Life. So these staff are supposed to be here, they're supposed to be immortals. And the way they're kept immortal is by eating the fruits of this tree. So it sounds like this is a big mythic thing, right, from the Bible. But it tells us there was a tree that was from a higher dimension that was brought down and could grow here, and its fruit, when it mingled with their cells, gave them immortality. So this is now about the Lucifer rebellion. Lucifer, depicted here, goes into rebellion. So again, this is an angel that's actually a very high being. It's an administrator type of an angel. These are angels that oversee the angelic host of numerous planets. So to think of them as admin angels. They are working for the domain of the mother. The mother spirit, the mother, divine mother, oversees the angelic host. So they're like the hierarchy with the mother. And built into the angelic hierarchy is free will. Free will. Angels have free will. And there's a weak point and a weak link that's in there that gives them flexibility. And 1 in a million go astray. So this is, I found this image that makes me think of Caligastia. He founded Dalmatia, He joined the rebellion 200,000 years BC. Dalmatia, the city, was destroyed. The angelic host joined him in rebellion. The adjudication we saw happened 85 or so. Caligastia chose to not live on. There was a judgment handed down, and he could have gone into rehab with other rock stars. And he chose oblivion. So you have an option. And this is the teaching of Lucifer. It's a whole chapter in the Urantia book. I boiled it down. According to Lucifer, who is created by fiat, by the Divine Mother, God does not exist. There is no will of God. I mean, this is pretty sweeping change. God is a myth invented by higher beings to aggrandize themselves. Inhabited planets, therefore, are free. Because there's this galactic government, right? The galactic government is extraterrestrials and angelics. They have a code, they have rules, they have interplanetary law, right? Interplanetary law. He said, we are not bound by interplanetary law because it's promulgated as a fraud. Interplanetary law is a fraud of aggrandizement by the higher beings. I mean, it's pretty crazy. The Nodites, anybody's heard of the land of Nod in the Bible? So the Nodites are the staff of Caligastia, gone to the dark side, able to interbreed with indigenous humans. After their Dalmatia actually went up in flames, they went north. They followed Caligastia, and their leader was a guy named Nod. And they went to live in the land of Nod. And if you know from the Bible, Cain, remember Cain and Abel, right? Cain, there's only 4 people on the planet, according to the Bible. There's Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel. That's it. So Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod in the east of Eden. Cain made love to his wife, and she became pregnant. So this is impossible, because there was nobody else on the planet, according to the Bible. So this is where the editors of the Bible made a big mistake. And there was a reason. They were trying to censor that prehistory for a reason. It's complicated. But they left that in, and that's a telltale sign of this prehistory. So the land of Nod was a pre-existing civilization, went back several hundred, 150,000 years, quite a few years, and here's this guy marching off to live there and bear a wife. Where did Cain get his wife? And that's where it is. So the first hybrids on the planet, according to this, are the Nodites. They procreate with the natives. Their children were superior. But why is that? Because they had a superior genetics. And so that's the source of the Nephilim, and that's the source of the Illuminati bloodlines. So these guys went to the dark side. They created a civilization north of the Tigris and Euphrates, and that is a violence-prone warrior civilization. Very prehistoric. So this is for those researching this. The Nodites, who are directly of origin from the Lucifer rebellion, are the prehistoric source of the Illuminati bloodlines and satanic cultism. Anybody recognize this? This is Madonna at the Super Bowl. Remember that? Remember what David Wilcock said about it? So, here it is, a survival of satanic symbolism at the Super Bowl. So that's why we got to do this work. We got to do this research. We've talked about the Nephilim. These are depictions of them. This is where these Nodites migrated to. They had outposts. This is very distant, pre-Sumerian. Now here's Sitchin. Sitchin states that this is a quibble with his translation. We don't have to get into that too much. But Sitchin says they came down from ships. The Bible says that they were fallen angels. So I side with the Bible on this, that the Nephilim are actually beings that were actually hybrid, fallen, not ancient astronauts. This is more about where they spread out and lived. Now, remember their double default. Double default, Adam and Eve, didn't work out. First big dispensation, destroyed. Adam and Eve are much later. This is where they started out. Warfare from the Nodites, who were dark side warrior class, invaded and ran Adam and Eve out of Cyprus. They fled here to the Tigris-Euphrates area. So they and their progeny, and they only got about 100 years into this, so their children, who were pure line violet race, migrate here, and that's why that is the source of civilization, because they settled that area 30,000 years ago, and their children over the eons intermarried with the Nodites. So the Nodites, who were sort of the dark side, evolved into just regular tribes. And that combination became the source of civilization, the source of the Aryans, so-called Aryans, migrating to India, China, migrating north to Europe. However, embedded in this group are the Illuminati bloodlines. So those that held to the Lucifer teachings were certain tribes that were pure line, and they held to this down to the present day. So here's Adam and Eve. They're a little pissed off about it. And so we talked about this, where it was 37,000 years ago. The second, we call it the second garden. So the first Garden of Eden was in Cyprus. Second garden is in Mesopotamia area in Tigris-Euphrates. This is, we've talked about, it's a biological uplift. This is how it correlates with the Bible. The Bible says they lived long ago in Mesopotamia, check. Bible says their progeny had a big impact, check. There was a presence of a tree of life, yes. Adam and Eve had the tree of life. They were forced to leave their location, tells us in the Bible, check. Does not correlate that they were interdimensional beings who incarnated, does not correlate that they're not the parents of mankind. Mankind, per your question, mankind was already there. Millions of millions of indigenous people. Those of you that are into Sumerian myth, this is a depiction of Adam and Eve with the tree of life. So a little bit about this. This is scientific information about this sunken land. In this depiction, it's called Atlantis City. It's actually Eden. We call it Eden Atlantis. This was first proposed as through research as being a sunken continent. We, Urantia people, got this data and did a major expedition in 2004. I published a book about it. We got one copy back there. This expedition found a wall right there, 1 mile down. And this was covered all over the world. It was a cover story in Atlantis Rising magazine. And that was a very expensive operation to get down there and get these pictures. So just background on this. How many of you know Plato's story of Atlantis? So Plato had about 50 things he said about Atlantis. We think that this location matches better than others. And if you go through it, and the book tells you, there are 48 matches to 50 things Plato said. This has to do with the kind of minerals that were there, the climate, the location, rivers running through it. And I think that would be enough to cover. There were a second expedition by this man named Robert Sarmas, heroic in the Urantia community. This guy devoted his life for 10 years to figuring this out. He got the geological data, he brought it forward, raised money, came to me, I did the book about it. Then with the book, we went out and raised quite a lot of money to take this boat out from Cyprus, from a port at Cyprus, with the equipment to go down into the eastern Mediterranean. This was the captain of the ship. This is our flag, and it just shows the equipment. Now this is the second expedition. The History Channel bought the rights to this, which was a bonanza for me as a publisher, because here we go, we have a History Channel. And we worked with this character who was the host, and they went out again with their equipment. History Channel had equipment that was better than our equipment. I'll tell you a story that I don't tell in public, except places like this. We experienced direct suppression from this. I was on the board of directors. We got a contact from two people that said, you better not go on this expedition without talking to us. So we had a meeting, a secret meeting. Two of the board members, I was there, and they issued a type of a death threat to us. They handed us a list of people who had been killed, who had stood up to the White House. Just handed across the table. And they said, the way you should do this expedition is you should do it through us. We will create a front at the University of San Diego, and you'll have an office, and we will protect you. So we rejected that. And, but having some experience, because I was in the 9/11 Truth movement for many years previous to this, I knew these guys mean business. And what I believe happened is they sabotaged this expedition because the equipment failed. This is Josh Bernstein on the ship. The software that managed this ship went down when we got over the top of the target. This is the target, and this crane also failed. And these are high professional. This stuff, two big failures, and it was a big embarrassment for the History Channel. But they still turned it into a program. They edited a lot of it out. But there was still some validation. The original data was not in dispute, that there was something there that looked like a wall. Anyway, that's what happened with that. And this is the book. The book, this was reviewed throughout the world, including in Pravda in Russia, as a very interesting find. And some of you may know Colin Wilson's work. Colin Wilson renounced his theory of Atlantis in this book and endorsed our theory. So that was a big thing for us. He wrote the preface to the second edition. So his theory was that it was Antarctica. He said, this is better. This is a better theory. So I'm backing these guys. So we're working with this fellow here who was the skipper on that ship. He was so impressed by this that he's raising money to go out a third time with better equipment. We have access, we think, to a submarine owned by Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft. He's got a private submarine to go down to the site with this guy as the expedition leader. This is for those of you interested in anthropology, history. I mentioned what we call the Adamites. So these are the children of Adam coming out of Mesopotamia over eons of time, intermarrying with, remember the Nodites are in these areas here, right? So the Nodites actually intermarried with the Adamites, and this was a superior genetics. And then their progeny went into Greece, and that's how Greece had these myths of we're descended from the gods. They went into India, and that's where the Vedas originated from. This is them spreading far and wide. Now this is for those of you that are fans of archaeology. How many of you know about Göbekli Tepe? This is very important. It was a big deal at the Contact in the Desert conference. Everybody was talking about Göbekli Tepe. This, I believe this fills in the story better than other theories. Because, why? Because this area had a superior civilization going back 35,000 years. And that explains how you could have a civilization that goes back well over 20,000 years, much older than Stonehenge. Much older. And what they're finding there is the further back they go, the more advanced they are, which is the opposite of what it should be. That's what's baffling. How could they be? It's supposed to be, everything else in archaeology is the opposite. They're getting more and more advanced. So this was actually a descent from a high civilization to a lesser civilization, and that's shown in the layers of Göbekli Tepe. And then we were talking about the Bosnian pyramid, and I think that that's in the same era as this. The Bosnian pyramids go back over 20,000 years, isn't that right? Or even 30,000? 25,000. So that's an era that goes back. It's way pre-Egypt, isn't it? This is an example of an artifact from Göbekli Tepe. This is quite advanced. Nothing on the planet anywhere close to this at this date. So this is one of the great mysteries that seems to corroborate the Urantia history. This is a top view. The director of Stanford's archaeology program said, "This site is unbelievably big and amazing at a ridiculously early date. Many people think it changes everything. All of our theories were wrong." So in summary, discovered 94, 40 years after the Urantia book's publication. 50 engraved stones, etc. It says at least 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. Shows signs of decline over several thousand years. So now we're come to the good news. The quarantine, as I mentioned, this is not agreed to by everyone who reads the Urantia book. So if you enter into a Urantia study group and talk about this, they'll know, oh, you're one of those esoteric people that believes it's new stuff. And so there's a split because it's those are people that they're anchored in a belief system based on a text versus being flexible. And now we know that those who have received these teachings through these mediums, and there's about over 100 of them, have all said the same thing. The quarantine was lifted. There was a grassroots efflorescence. Began in the late 80s, and up to 50 locations. We now have discovered nearly 100 locations through other countries. These are where Urantia book students were contacted and became channels. And this is not very well known. The only publisher of that material is me. I published that material. The Celestials are referring to the Urantia book as their core text. So you kind of have to know the Urantia text to understand this material. It's called, we don't call it channeling, we call it transmitting, receiving. It's not trans-channeling, it's conscious channeling. And there's 20,000 pages of materials, and it's quite a corpus. This is one of the websites. It's called tmarchives.com that has this 20,000 pages. It's much more than that, really. And this is just to give you a sample of some of the teachers. This is alphabetical order. There are hundreds of celestial beings who have spoken through us. Alana, Alista, Alcon, Altern, Ambrasia, Ambrose. It goes on and on and on. These are beings from higher worlds that are brought here in the thousands and thousands and thousands of them are present. Mainly people don't know that they're being seeded with their ideas, but in our community, we're given more information because we have the textbook as a reference. This is another group that is at dialogues.danal.org. This is a very good site, better than the other one, searchable, has all this material. You can go in there and plug in a keyword and get an amazing teachings. This gives you an idea of how vast this is. These are topics that the Celestials have been teaching us about. So we've got the Urantia text, and we've got supplemental teachings on all kinds of topics. We've got supplemental teachings on Adam and Eve, and all sorts of other things. And it goes on and on. This is the G's. Galactic Federation is one of the topics, not covered in the Urantia book, covered in the new materials. Other topics, other listings. Here's a listing of some of the teachers in M. Metatron is one of them. Michael and Mondranson. This is a very important name. I want to talk about him now. It's like this. Mondranson is the name of the avatar of the age according to these teachings. Mondranson is present on the planet in spirit, and I heard last week from one of the channels that he's now in material form, able to come in and out of material form, popping in and out. His mission is to create a planet like other planets that are not unstable. We're unstable. We're just unstable. We're like an unstable, mentally ill patient that's unstable, right? So we do not, our civilizations rise and fall. There's not one civilization that has not fallen. Except maybe Chinese civilization has done pretty well for sustainability. But so second goal is united humankind. Third goal is a co-creation of celestials and humans. Why a co-creation of celestials and humans? Because there will be avatar incarnations. So we had these incarnations which defaulted. Now they're going to have a compensatory set of incarnations. Mongeronson is called Magisterial Son. Magisterial, as I mentioned earlier, is a being emanating from the central universe. So they come from 7th dimension, and when they incarnate, that's called a paradise being incarnating. That's a very, very high being incarnation. This is the highest place you can come from, and they're coming to the lowest place. And that's beautiful when you get a blend of high and low, that the contrast of high and low blended. That's beauty. That's a beautiful thing. So that's what I think is occurring from the materials we've been receiving. And we got a few minutes for questions. Yeah, the question on that was what are really the composition of these avatars in the staff, the 100 avatars? Technically, they're ascended masters, ascended humans, who volunteered. They said they had 780,000 volunteers for 100 positions. They're in higher worlds. They volunteer to come here and teach. They're in subtle bodies. So the personalities there, but they're constructed bodies. They're constructed out of human bodies, human genetics. And so the question is, why would Madonna, who seems to be anti-Illuminati, appearing at the Super Bowl in satanic outfit? So I think these people all have to make deals to be in their careers. And you can name case after case of artists who do that. Tricia, you had a question, if you like. The question was, what does the Mongeronson do here when he's the Magisterial Son incarnate? This book that's back there, I don't have many copies, is the introduction to that. His work is social. It's not individual spirituality. That work is being done ongoing, but his work is to reform government and society and create institutions that are sustainable, because if they're not sustainable, you cannot grow your soul because you're dead in war. And so they want to create advanced souls, and up in the upper worlds, when people come from here, from Urantia, they're pygmies. They're backward. They're crazies. And so in the higher worlds, it's like, oh gosh, Urantians are ascending. They're really backward. And we have to rehab. They have to put him in rehab, like in limbo. So his job is civilization building. So he incarnates with a large staff of incarnate beings. And one of the channels said it's going to be in upstate New York. I cannot confirm that. Yeah, how does the Urantia material treat the return of the divine feminine? That is treated in many, many ways. In post-adjudication, 1985, the circuits were now reconnected. Therefore, the Divine Mother can much more easily show up into our lives. I have a friend who had an apparition of Mary Magdalene in 1989, for example. And many of you are teaching of the Divine Feminine because of the revelations you're getting post-85. It's easier to receive that, but she's already present anyway. But there will be incarnate females, by the way, with Mongeronson's staff. There'll be male and female. So that's another way. So the question is, what happens with the Illuminati in the light of all these developments? At the spiritual level, spiritually, they're doing the correcting time. Remember, the correcting time is the outpouring of the Holy Spirit in all these different ways to all the different religions, so that everybody on the planet is empowered, self-empowered. So once you're self-empowered, you're going to stand up to the oppressor. You're going to have the courage to do it. So we saw it in Cairo. Many of these people were standing up and being mowed down. That's the power of the spiritual outpouring we see in these flashpoints. So that's at the grassroots level. But at the higher levels, we're being told continually that we, the Celestials, are working with the elites and appearing to them, as, for example, they appeared to Gorbachev. So right after the adjudication, there was an angelic appearance to Gorbachev in 1986. And they're negotiating with them. But we get much more on that from Cobra and others that are outside the Urantia orbit, but it correlates very well. But we can get into this some more. And my site is Evolving-Souls with a hyphen, Evolving-Souls.org. It's on your sheet also. And remember these other sites I showed you, tmarchives.com, and then urantia.org is an introductory, wonderful site. Thank you, everybody.